Hi, Mike. Welcome to Venture with Grace. We're live.
Hey, Grace. Thanks for having me.
To start off the show, I would love for the audience to learn more about you. And why don't we start? I feel like one thing I hear about like on other podcasts that I thought were really interesting was like, I think you started your career as like an engineer at a chip design firm. Is
Yeah,
that correct?
that's
Like,
right.
yeah, tell us more.
Yeah, no, you're right. So I started, as an engineer in college and kind of just followed that path. Thought that's what I was supposed to do, and so ended up taking my first job as kind of a systems engineer at a naval architecture firm. And so we were working on ship design and hydrostatic analysis for ships. And I did that for about 2 years. It was a super interesting job, a lot of hands-on work in around ship construction and design. And then ultimately found I was getting pulled towards more interesting things. Ended up joining a consulting firm at the time who was hiring engineers to help evaluate emerging energy technologies. And so this was probably 2011, 2012 timeframe, which for folks that remember, that was like the same time as the first clean tech venture backed boom. And so there were a bunch of really interesting companies at that time that were getting funded by venture firms. Often they were really deep tech, super ambitious projects trying to take on climate change. And in my consulting role, we were hired by a combination of big companies, utilities, Department of Energy to help analyze these, assess these early technologies and try to, understand which ones were worth them investing more time in. And so that was honestly my first exposure to the venture-backed tech ecosystem in a really upfront way. And through that, just got super, I don't know, just energized by seeing the ambitious projects these founders were working on. I ended up getting really involved at that time in the clean tech ecosystem that was largely based out of Boston at that time. Ended up actually leaving my consulting job to go intern for a clean tech VC that existed at that time. And that was like really my first exposure to, wow, this is what it looks like to back these super ambitious early stage founders. This is what venture looks like. And ended up deciding I loved the venture side of it, and unfortunately, I think most of the companies that got backed at that time, they were taking on really ambitious projects that took far longer, often took far more capital to complete than was a really good fit for venture funding. And so while that wave of clean tech, I don't think ended as well as many people would have hoped, it was a great introduction for me. I ended up going back to business school, decided I wanted to focus all of my time on working with startups and venture funds. And so from there, I really spent 2 years interning with a bunch of clean tech, a bunch of enterprise software companies in Boston, two of which happened to be Bessemer-backed startups, and working with a handful of other VCs at that time. And the long story short is that I just happened to have been able to build a relationship with a partner in Bessemer. And I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time when I was graduating, that they happened to have a role opening up. And I was able to join full time back in 2017. And so, yeah, I've been there 7 years, and it's been an awesome ride since.
I wonder, so like before we dive into Bessemer and like your career, I have so many questions in the chip design era, like because I feel like right now it's like such a popular sector. I've seen like YC company are doing this, or like a lot of like startup founders are like focusing on like creating software for the chip design space. So like I wonder is like for example for like stimulate or like simulate like debug chip design process like a actual area that like people should focus on, or like is there like in the chip design area, like what is like the most interesting or like the energy people should spend on building that space?
No, it's a great question. I would just clarify. So my initial job was in ship design. So like actually large, ocean going vessels versus ship.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. For some
No,
reason, I'm like chip design. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense because like you look at a lot of supply chain, you're like supply chain expert. You were like talking
yeah.
about Shippo and other like supply chain companies in different podcasts. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's like so much. That makes so much more sense. I'm like, because I've been when I was like listening to the podcast, I'm like chip design company. And then I started like really dig down into the rabbit hole of like okay, does these things make sense? What about like, so for example, for now, like let's talk about like, since you're working at Bessemer, like Bessemer has been publishing these like amazing AI reports. And I wonder like what are some core areas that you feel like people should spend more time on, most like, you know, both like founder building in, as well as like, you know, VC should invest times on basically.
Yeah, sure. And maybe just to back up and give a little bit more context on why we spend so much time on these, I'm happy to also give a little context for how we work. And so, you know, the Bessemer, one of the, I think, defining characteristics of how we organize ourselves and how we spend a lot of our time is that we really believe in what we call internally these roadmaps, which is just our word for a thesis. And we really spend a lot of time going out doing primary research, talking to customers, trying to understand the kind of the major unlocks in the technology or the why now for a new opportunity to exist. And then we debate them and we present them internally, we debate them across the firm, and we set up ultimately small teams to go out and execute against these theses, try to find the best founders anywhere in the world that are, you know, building along the lines of one of the roadmaps that we're really excited about. And so this is kind of, it's foundational to everything we do. As you mentioned, we've put out a lot recently on AI, broadly, and particularly vertical AI, which is where I spend the vast majority of my time. And for me, the history there goes back to a little bit of like Bessemer's history, probably over the last really decade. I think we may have been fortunate to have invested in more vertical SaaS companies than maybe any other venture firm, you know, certainly up there in terms of the folks that have spent the most time in that category. And it was a really good period for investing in vertical SaaS, from companies like Toast in restaurant and hospitality, to Procore in construction, to Service Titan in home services, and the list goes on and on. We've probably got 25 other early stage vertical SaaS companies focusing on different categories. And so we've had the chance to see the evolution of the vertical SaaS wave up, you know, from a first row seat. We've seen what's worked there. And we have a really good understanding of how well things can go when it goes right. The advantages of being really focused on a specific vertical. And so as we saw all of these, you know, AI unlocks evolving over the past 2 years, certainly we've got folks on our team focused on every stage and every level of the AI stack. But a big portion of our team, myself included, is very much focused on what does this mean for the vertical applications that we've been investing in over the past 10 years? What's the next 10 years of vertical AI applications look like? And so for me, I think maybe the best way to, at the highest level, how I think about what's so exciting about vertical AI right now is that we've largely, I would say, kind of tapped the obvious software opportunities in major verticals. Most major software verticals that are large enough to support a vertical SaaS company, they have a solid system of record software that already exists there. And otherwise, maybe they don't purchase a lot of other software outside of that one platform. And the rest of what they do is you know, mostly human services around that core system of record. I think today with vertical AI, we now have the potential to transform much more human services spend into software spend. We think that creates the opportunity for many more net new categories of software that just didn't exist before. So that's where we think we're going to see in a lot of these either verticals that already have a system of record, we're going to see new categories get created alongside of that are helping to automate and take on much more of the today manual human work that goes alongside of that. Or we're going to see opportunities in verticals that were otherwise way too small to support a venture-backed outcome. If you can now charge more money for a software product because it's doing far more of the work than a traditional system of record used to be able to do, we think it's now possible to build a venture-backed outcome in an industry that otherwise might have been thought of as too small to support a venture-backed outcome. So those are like the really high-level reasons, but happy to get into it more.
I wonder, how is the Cloud 100 being selected?
Yeah, Cloud 100 is incredibly competitive, and Cloud 100 is largely selected based on, you know, the revenue evaluation, and the scale, as well as the feedback from our panel of judges who are experts in the cloud ecosystem. And so I think there we're probably seeing, there are certainly some AI application companies that have grown really quickly and broken into that already. But I believe the benchmarks there are at this point are companies that are well over $1 billion in valuation for sure. And there have been some AI application companies that have gotten to that scale yet, but I think most of the ones that we're really excited about are still a little bit earlier, so they haven't quite cracked into that tier yet.
I wonder, so like for the multimodals and like AI agents, like, so I guess like number one question is like for the entire AI space, I guess like how would you spend your time on, let's say like, I don't know, like 20% time multimodal, maybe like 40% on AI agents, or like how do you kind of spend your time on deep dive into these like major categories? And then maybe we can go into the like major business models, for example, like Copilot or AI-enabled services and everything else.
Yeah, it's a great question. So let's come to the business model second. I think first of where I and most of our team are spending the vast majority of our time in vertical AI is looking cross vertical. So we will actually kind of look at every major vertical and try to identify, based on what we know about the capabilities that are available now, which verticals do we think are most exciting? Where do we want to try to spend our time? Because we do think to be successful at investing in these vertical solutions, you have to understand the fundamentals of each vertical.
I'm sorry. I have a piggyback question in this tiny question. Okay, so I think one of the things I'm really confused is like, I think a lot of like investors will really focusing on a group of customer as their like major customer profile. Like for example, chief information officer of like Fortune 500, and then maybe they would provide some insights on like, oh, here's like 4 category of things we're looking at, and like, but on the other hand, I wonder like, but by the time that they buy the services, it may be like you have to invest like maybe call it like 8 years earlier than they purchase it, or like becoming a client for like because of like some of these like apps are like taking forever to develop. How do you kind of having the mental framework of like whose opinion matters, and like how do you predict what will be like where people will spend money in the next like 8 years? Because I think it's nice to immediately like invest in something that like people may want today, but like 5 years from now they want something different. I wonder like how do you kind of like adjust, like I guess like evaluate which piece of like feedback that you would take as an investor.
Totally. I think it's a great point that first, in a lot of the companies, particularly the stage we invest at, which is super early, I mean, seed, Series A, Series B for the most part, it's that's at a stage where the early adopters may be really excited about it, but certainly the majority of a market may not be obvious to them that they need this. They certainly haven't created budget for it. It's not something they're planning on buying. So you're right. You can't. You have to go into the research and the diligence expecting that you're going to get a lot of mixed results from people. If it was like if 10 out of 10 people said this was obvious, you're likely too late. So the stage we're investing in, I totally agree. And often what we're looking for is like we're looking for a handful of customers who are early adopters of technology who are willing to say, this is a no-brainer. It's a 10x better value prop than the way the industry used to do it, and I just know in 10 years from now this is how we're all going to do things, right? And what you want to hear is that that like radical product market fit love from at least folks who are forward thinking enough to lean into it, understanding that likely is not representative of where the broader market is today. And so I think that's like oftentimes the work we're doing early on is trying to understand that, and then also trying to bank on just things that we think, value props that will be equally as compelling 10 years from now, things that are revenue generating, dramatically cost savings, things, products that ideally are going to be super sticky into the daily workflows of a customer. And so with that lens, I mean, you were asking about kind of how we spend our time. I think today, I guess I'd characterize it as we're in this period where we've had a language model. We're still less than 2 years from ChatGPT release, but we've had language models broadly available for quite a while at this point. And I think you can look at the impact it's had on some of the industries where it's already had dramatic impact, or we've seen the most startup activity, have tended to be in industries that are highly text first. So I think of legal, customer support, chat, and content generation. Those are like three of the industries where it is an extremely obvious use case. There have been a ton of companies that have been formed. Many of them are doing very well because there's a big market there, and it's the use case is very obvious given how text first those industries are. But I think what gets me really excited today is we've got there's a tremendous amount of the rest of the economy that uses text, but it's like not a text first solution is not enough to fully automate or dramatically impact their day-to-day workflow. And a lot of their other workflow happens via some other modality. It happens via talking on the phone, meeting customers in person. It happens via looking at graphical data and trying to determine that, or designing something in a modeling software. It's like there's all of these other roles that take place. And that's where I think we're at this tipping point where all of a sudden the multimodal models that you referenced are now becoming widely available, are becoming much more powerful and flexible. And so we're starting to see a wave of multimodal based vertical AI applications that are starting to serve those other use cases, whether it's an industry that needs to be able to incorporate audio data, needs to generate voice for a call, needs to be able to capture images and be able to extract information from those. I think, to me, that's the most exciting part, that I think the 80% of the industries that haven't been largely impacted yet are now on the verge of being impacted. So we spent a bunch of time trying to map those out, figure out what are the industries and the use cases that we want to be going after.
Totally. I wonder for, let's say, let's break down the I guess three major business model, for example, the Copilot, the agents, and the AI enabled services. So first of all, for Copilots, can you give the audience your definition of a Copilot? And maybe we can start from there.
Yeah. For me, I think, a Copilot very simply is an AI application that sits alongside a user and helps them to dramatically accelerate some portion of their workflow, but leaving the human still in the loop.
Okay. So why don't we use one of the, maybe you can give the audience a little bit more about what are some portfolio companies that you feel excited about, and share a little bit more about maybe how did you find the company, and then walk us through your thinking process on from evaluating it to investing in it and maybe helping them grow.
Sure. We can talk through, we have a lot of examples. This is probably the category where we have the largest of our AI-enabled services portfolio, of our Copilot portfolio is in this category. Examples I can give you are, we've got companies like Raft AI, which is automating these workflows with a similar solution for global freight forwarders, using a combination of image models and text models to extract data from PDFs, unstructured data, and put that into their freight forwarder system of record, and then automate a bunch of downstream workflows, like kicking off trade finance workflows and things like that. We've also got companies that are incorporating other modalities like Rilla Voice in field sales, which is the leading field sales analytics product for conversations that are happening outside of the office. And maybe a great example here would be Abridge, which is the leading medical language translation company. And so for example, there, Abridge's app, which it would fall under this Copilot category, it's an app that a physician runs on their phone. They use it to record an interaction, a patient visit, and the app will record the conversation, transcribe it, and then use that information to generate the the physician's note, which is a incredibly labor-intensive, not a great use of the physician's time. And Bridge is able to do that in a way that is not only dramatically faster, but hopefully also more accurate, because you're not relying on the physician to have to pull these details from memory after the visit. And then they can similarly automate downstream workflows, like pulling in what are the insurance billing codes that would be relevant for this use case. And so I think those are examples where we're seeing a Copilot have an incredible impact on the end user, enabling them to both free up a lot more time, hopefully physicians being able to see more patients, and ultimately doing a better job of capturing the relevant information from that interaction.
I remember like seeing like the article about like why fintech is like the supply chain frontier article, and then you talk a little bit about like the Raft AI part, and I wonder like, so I understand like for example, like for the people who are managing who are trying to automate the like process of like supply chain and everything, so like there's a lot of like uploading different documents onto the computer, and then that's like one of the major problem people can solve. But I wonder like, what's a comparison to the traditional companies that are not like pre AI era? I feel like a lot of company would be able to allow you to upload these like unstructured data on top of a platform. What, like, how do you evaluate like how much technology improvement there is for a category like this, and how do you, I guess, like um what would be like the benchmark that you're using to kind of like um evaluate like if that particular company can stand out among the crowd? And is this like a fragmented market, or is this like more concentrated market that where you can just talk to like 5 major company and then it's done?
Yeah, I'm happy to go into this more. So supply chain logistics, as you mentioned, this happens to be one of the verticals where I've done a deep dive, and we spent a lot of time. And I think the context for this industry is obviously a massive industry. It represents roughly over 10% of global GDP is in the movement of goods. And the way that because it's such a global industry, everything in the end of the day relies on some form of literally scanned paper document, because paper is the lowest common denominator form of information that's accepted anywhere in the world. And so you really have paper documents that accompany these shipments. But in most of the enterprise freight forwarders, they're working with a scanned digital copy of it, a PDF, but it's likely got handwritten scribbles on it, like it might have stains on it. It's like these are very messy documents. They can be 50, 100 pages with tables that are like mixed across pages.
Wait, why can't they just pull out like something like an iPad or like their phone just to be like, okay, here's like just enter the 3 information you need, like the price or like the time you need to deliver or something? Can they just use like an app?
So that's what I'm saying. Like these would be hundreds of pages sometimes, the documents that are accompanying a shipment. And so you can scan them to get them all digitized. And traditionally there were like OCR or types of like legacy software to do some basic data extraction from these PDFs. But because of how complicated they were, and the fact that like you might have data that was split across multiple pages, or information that you need to reference from different points, pre-AI.
I'm gonna sound really stupid here, but like, what's in the 100 pages thing? Like, is that like just like, oh, we want to avoid these like legal consequences of like X, Y, and Z, so it's like 100 pages, or like what's in the 100 pages? That's a book, basically. I feel like no one will actually read them.
This
Are
would
they?
be documenting. So this would be documenting everything that's in a shipment. So think about like, you could have multiple containers
Oh, okay.
for goods, and then you need all the proper documentation to clear customs in every geography that you're going through. And so the customs clearance piece of it is what makes this often really critical, that you also get it right. Like if Nike's importing sneakers and they don't properly declare what was in there and reference the proper customs clearance codes, they could be fined dramatically. So that's why the accuracy is really critical. And these documents are really long because they just happen to largely involve.
They're all printed out.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Are you serious? I'm sorry, that's crazy.
It's wild. They're printed out and then they get scanned and the PDFs gets passed around. But it's it's wild that is how the global logistics world operates still. And so as a result,
please save the trees. That's crazy. Please do not make global warming happen again. Yeah. But anyway, that's crazy. So but is there someone can just create an app that just distribute it to everyone to be like, hey, like if you want to log something, use this app?
Totally. And what you're describing is exactly what I thought when I first got involved in supply chain logistics. Well, this should all be digitized. Why don't we just get everyone on the same software and like everyone enter the same information and like problem solved? It sounds very elegant that way. And I think the reality is you're dealing with the kind of customs and border patrol of every country around the world. It's, you're dealing with multiple languages, geographies. It's a nearly impossible coordination task to get everyone to agree on this is a common standard of digital information that we're going to pass around. And thus, and there've been people that tried, and it's, maybe it happens at some point, but for the foreseeable future, we're still going to be stuck with paper, PDFs, basically scanned documents, and emails. That's how this information travels.
I'm sorry that we're so off track of the topic today, but I want to be a little bit even more off track. As I chatted with a company in the restaurant space, their solution for the restaurant owner was like, they were talking about like the restaurant industry, people's inventory are still like writing by hands on a piece of tiny paper. And I thought that was crazy. And then they're leveraging like, I don't know, AI to like essentially just an app for people to type in like, what vegetable you need for the restaurant to happen that day. I wonder, so like for the traditional industry to be like transformed by AI, like it sounds like there must be some fundamental stuff happen. For example, like people have to have a hardware that people can leverage to actually upload their data, right? Like, so like as you just mentioned, like the Copilot would be like people converting the PDF more accurately, like unstructured data onto one software. Is there other solutions to like that kind of things, or like for that to happen, like for your portfolio company to like onboard new clients? How are they onboarding new clients on as a bulk? Like, so instead of like just onboarding like each individual shipping company, like is there like a shipping association that they could just like onboard everybody?
That's a good question for the company to go to market. I think certainly we'd love to sign up customers in bulk, but today it's often this is a really strategic decision about the technology that they're using to handle a core part of their core information for their business, and so that often requires a high touch one by one sale. But what I'd say, like broadly speaking, you've referenced restaurants. I think there are lots and lots of industries that still operate either with that example. Somebody's scribbling notes down on paper. There's something that is not well structured, such that it actually requires AI to handle the ambiguity of pulling this information in. So I'm personally excited about all of these industries where like construction would be another example, where you've got a construction drawing, somebody's walking a construction site and making markups as they walk. We're seeing companies right now that are helping to automate the construction inspection process. There are lots and lots of these industries where previously, a pre-AI version of the software would not be able to handle those kinds of inputs, and now they are something that we can work with.
I wonder, like, what's a major difference between like Copilot and AI-enabled services?
Yeah, so this AI-enabled services piece is kind of what it sounds like, which is you've certainly got some sort of software that often will similarly resemble the Copilot product, but rather than giving it directly to the end user to use, the AI-enabled service company will have an internal team of humans that play some role largely in a quality assurance kind of role. And so, the opportunity here is great because you can actually, by taking on a full service versus just giving the product to the customer, as in the Copilot, you can often charge more because you're like fully replacing an end-to-end service, and you're not giving the customer a tool, you're actually giving them the deliverable or whatever the outcome that they were seeking was. And so, an example in our portfolio would be a company called EvenUp. which is like the leading player in AI-enabled services for the personal injury lawyer market. And just to give you some context on this example, this is a category where a lot of the work that these attorneys spend their time on is in the upfront processing of all the documents that are involved with the case, and then generating what's called a demand letter, which is essentially the primary deliverable that an attorney will generate for their client. And so EvenUp's product is a combination of AI-enabled software that uses a bunch of different LLMs to ingest all the documents that might be associated with an incident. It could be medical records, it could be other type of incident reports. Put that all together and generate this demand letter in the template of that lawyer. And before they send it back, they actually have an in-house team of lawyers, paralegals that will review it for quality. And thus they're able to offload that entire process, which is just, previously could take weeks down to like now this is like a day or two to get this demand letter back. And thus for their customers, for these law firms, they are now able to service, far more business with the same team because this bottleneck has been offloaded from their plate. And so the ROI is really compelling. In the case of EvenUp, they're actually able to charge relative to what these law firms used to be spending on technology. EvenUp is substantially growing, their technology spend. They're creating a new category of software and technology spend that previously didn't exist. And so I think this is a great example of like how an AI-enabled service can grow the market for software.
I wonder, I feel like in the legal space, there's definitely a lot of different companies that are doing interesting things. Like I wonder why did they chose like personal injury first to solve?
Yeah, I mean, I could, the team would be better to answer this one, and I won't try to, tell their founding story for them. But I think there's a lot of dynamics that work well for them in this industry, which is one, there's like a lot of, this is a surprisingly very large market in the US. You've got a lot of small to mid-sized firms to service. It's also an industry that is, they don't bill on a time basis. They charge on a contingency basis, or basically they get paid on the outcome. And so I think that's one of the things to consider in terms of the business models here. Like if you're selling efficiency software to an end customer that makes their money based on how much time they charge, they may have an adverse incentive to become more efficient. And this happens to be a category of legal where it's a net positive for these lawyers. They can actually do more business, and given that they're not charging by the hour, it actually helps them generate more revenue, not less.
I wonder to onboard the lawyers, like, so are the founders, like, I'm sure like a person from the founding team will come from the legal industry. But I wonder how do they like separate themselves versus like, there's a lot of people who are doing a GPT wrapper that are like creating some sort of like legal services. Basically, a lot of the apps that I'm currently seeing, it's sort of like a ChatGPT version of things like in-house, and then maybe like a lot of design partners, like aka the lawyers, will upload their existing contract on top of the platform and then create some sort of like generative contract. And then like that's like how the process is like automated. And I wonder like how do you like identify if like a portfolio company would have a um edge compared to like competitors in that industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in the case of, I agree. We see lots of companies that are doing, something like what you just described there, internal tools for a law firm. In the case of EvenUp, but I think there's a handful of things that help them differentiate themselves. I mean, one is just there's a lot of complexity in figuring out which models are right to handle which types of documents. How do I stitch these documents together, particularly if I'm dealing with documents that have graphical information, tabular information, and how do I make sense of like what is the context of this health record versus some other document? To do that in a way where I could actually coherently generate the demand letter that they're looking for. I think the other piece that's also really important about this is building an AI-enabled services business requires you to have a really tight feedback loop between the product side of the business and the services side, the people actually providing the manual human review. And so I think that's another area where a company like EvenUp has been able to build real defensibility relative to a company that's just selling, here's an internal search or chat tool for your legal documents. And so I think, we could talk more about defensibility. I think it's a super interesting discussion we spent a lot of time on, but ultimately it's like a lot of these, it's a lot of small pieces that add up to build a product that is much more robust and capable of serving the end need than just like the light wrapper that you reference.
Totally. I wonder when it comes to like the go-to-market strategies, like do you bet on like the companies that coming from an industry and like oh, first of all, like would you pick the industry that's like more fragmented or like more concentrated to enable like a certain AI services? And then since like a lot of people were talking about like, big company right now are also competing with startups in like various industries. How do you pick a company, like how do you pick an industry that's niche but not too niche to enter, to have a chance to win the whole market if it's like fragmented, um, distributed?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time on this in our vertical SaaS, vertical AI investing because a huge, I'm sure all your listeners are aware, like one of the biggest biggest drivers of a potential return is how big is the market. That's often the cap, and particularly that's true within a lot of vertical specific solutions. The conventional wisdom being a lot of verticals might be too small to support a venture-backed outcome. So we look at a lot of all of those factors. How big is the total market? How big is like a real addressable market if we had a very tight definition of the customer's current ICP, their ideal customer profile today? And so we'll try to have like a conservative sizing of the market, and then we'll have some, what you need to believe to get from the conservative market to the much larger market that allows them to drive the really kind of home run venture outcome. And then in terms of the concentration and fragmentation question, I kind of think of it as like there's upper and lower bounds. If fragmented can be fine. I'll just reference like we've got a business, Gloss Genius, which is an incredible vertical SaaS company that is largely started out by targeting self practitioners. This was like a software product for really small beauty and salon owners, like oftentimes, kind of a single seat booth renter. So this is somebody who's a sole practitioner. And in that case, the market is incredibly fragmented. You're talking about selling to a business of one. The ACV, the amount that they're willing to pay you, likely wouldn't be large enough in most cases to support a large outbound sales team, for instance. But they were able to make that work because they were super efficient with their go-to-market. They were able to leverage a lot of referrals and just like bottoms-up community growth. And so I always think of it like, if you just have to be able to match what is the ACV with what is the cost of the go-to-market. And so in these cases where it's possible to serve a very, very fragmented market, but you have to have some really unique, unfair go-to-market advantage. I would say a lot of our businesses, if they're targeting a customer where you have to employ some sort of paid inside sales force to be calling on customers, it's hard to make those economics work below like $10,000 ACVs, maybe in $15,000 ACVs to really make the payback attractive. And so we do spend some time looking at, if this is the go-to-market and this is how much it costs, we have to believe that the customers are at least of such size that the business can make an attractive payback on acquiring them. So that's how I think about the lower bound. And then at the upper bound, in terms of how concentrated is too concentrated for the market, I think it just really depends. There are certainly industries like ocean freight I would reference as an industry where you've got something like 7 large ocean carriers. And that's an incredibly small number of logos to have to sell to. And so I think that's an example where that's really hard. You could talk about, there's plenty of other large enterprise industries in the US, health systems in the US. You've got far more they're each really large. It takes a long time to sell to them. But if you can crack into them, it's a massive market. And so I think those, again, the flip side there being sales cycles are long, they're expensive, but if you can capture enough value, then the trade-off totally works.
I have a question there. So like I feel like so as a small check angel investor, I feel like most of the company I have like put a little bit of money in is typically like they identify some sort of problem within a really high ticket client. So for example, let's say call it like a hedge fund or like something like that. So like they are solving a really important problem for like a really small amount of high ticket clients. Um to that kind of like go to market action, like how do you suggest people to go to market with a small group of people that they can sell to? And then for the company that you just mentioned, like it seems like they are in a fragmented market, like basically the beauty, they're selling to salons or something like the software. So like for that kind of things to happen, I feel like it's probably like a opposite go to market motion where like when you have a small group of clients. um how do you advise both of these kind of companies? Like which one do you feel like is better? In a parallel motion, I can think of like I feel like it's kind of like, do you go to the consumer or do you go to the SaaS version? Because of like I feel like for the when you're selling something to a one person small business, it's kind of like just consumer go to market, and versus like the B2B SaaS, which is like high ticket by like less amount of client that you can convince. um how do you budget your time on spending to on like coaching these business on like growing their businesses?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that for a business like Lost Genius, for instance, it is particularly in the early days when they were entirely focused on this. Now they've expanded to sell to larger salons, but when they're very much focused on the sole practitioner. It was very much like you say, marketing to consumers. I mean, you're marketing to individual people, and so you have to figure out the really efficient, clever things that work. And I think that's really rare. I mean, this is product-led growth in the end of the day. And it's just the product needs to be incredible. You need to figure out like how to mobilize your base of evangelists and your big fans to share. And so the people that have done this well have figured out how to create community around their users. And I think that can be super powerful. If you've got like a community of folks that not only are talking about your product, but they're also talking about how it's changed the way that they do their business. They talk about best practices, and like we've seen businesses like this that create this community that transcends just the usage of their product. That's honestly, it's wonderful when you can achieve it, but I think it's very rare. We see very few companies that do that, which is why it's hard to build a business serving a very small individual user.
So at the very beginning, I guess like what kind of traction do you have to see in these businesses to convince you that like they have a high potential?
Yeah, I mean, often what that business would look like, the one serving a very low end, small ticket customer, would be essential, almost like no paid marketing. To be honest, often they'll have, they're spending barely anything on paid marketing. They're getting paid back extremely quickly. I mean, for that to work in the early days, you probably have sub 6 month CAC payback, maybe even substantially less. And then you probably would want to see some signs of viral word of mouth growth. So like in an example like Lost Genius, you'd see it in the app rating reviews of the app. You'd see it, people talking about it on social media. There are like whole communities devoted to people that want to share this product and the impact it's had on their business because it's transformational. So those are the kinds of things we look for early days.
So how would you find a business like that?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. Yeah, we're looking all day, every day to find businesses that are really efficient. It's there's no shortcut there. It's just
I think it's really hard to benchmark though. I would meet with like a company and they would be like, we are getting X amount of customer, and then like our rate is blah blah blah. But like it's really hard to find the exact business in that exact category. It's very, very rare to find, I would say, two companies that are doing exact same strategy in one category. Even for example, if you're talking like deep fake or some other company that are solving like, these like security issues, even they're solving the same problem. Like people have different go-to-market motions. Like some are focusing on banks, some are focusing on like I don't know, like voice. And so like maybe this is a great segue to pivot onto like you know, you're specialized in voice AI. Like why don't we talk about like, you know, what's your finding there? And like I personally feel like security, cybersecurity, deep fake sector is like a lot of I've seen a lot of founders that are like creating stuff in that space. Would love to like hear your thought process on like how to finding a company that actually worthwhile.
Yeah, we can talk about both, and I want to make sure we touch on both separately because they're both big topics. But maybe first on the voice piece. So as part of this broader focus on vertical AI applications, one of the things that personally got me really excited are all of these new voice AI applications that we're seeing. And to my point earlier, I think there are lots of businesses where text alone was not enough because people spend a lot of time on the phone, particularly small businesses. A ton of their business happens over the phone, and so there are obviously huge opportunities if you can really offload those conversations. And so I'm sure everyone is familiar with having a really frustrating conversation with a legacy automated voice product, which are traditionally called IVR products, and like that's what powers all of these enterprise customer support lines that you call, where you have to press all these different numbers and get frustrated when it ultimately doesn't get you where you want to go. What has me really excited today is first just AI powered voice products are now just using LLMs as the decision logic layer rather than having this very static logic tree of got to press one for this, press two for that. LLMs are now have much stronger conversational logic, and thus they can have a much more flexible, natural conversation with a user and can understand what they're trying to get at much faster. So you can actually get a user to resolution in a dramatically shorter period of time, even if the user knows that it's they're not speaking with a human, which is the case with all of these products. As long as they're able to get to resolution quickly, I actually think most humans are willing to have that conversation with an agent. And so we're seeing both dramatic improvement there, dramatic improvement on the generative voice side of things that's able to actually provide a much more kind of realistic like conversation, which gives the impression that this is an intelligent agent that I'm speaking with. And then we're seeing companies build applications that are very vertical focused and actually like revenue generating in many cases. I mean, the example that I often reference is, you're running a plumbing business or something, and this is a competitive industry, largely a commodity service. When somebody needs a service, particularly if they're calling after hours because the air conditioner broke or something, if you don't have anyone staffing the phone, you're going to lose that business. And today, folks have tried having an answering service or something else, but all of a sudden we have these AI voice agents that can now pick up the phone, answer as if they were your business, and not only diagnose the problem but also negotiate a rate with the customer and schedule to have a technician out there the next day. They're deeply integrated into your system of record, so they can make sure that the whole conversation is captured. And I think those are examples where, it's a very easy pitch to make to a business owner. Would you like to make sure you didn't lose any revenue after hours? Those are the kinds of use cases that we're seeing that I think are really exciting, and we're just scratching the surface there of what's possible with voice.
I wonder, like, I feel like I guess like from the voice perspective, how do you identify where would be the biggest client coming from? It's not like, and so I'm sure there will be like a lot of customer service related things, but I actually don't want to hear people's voice. I just want the problem to be solved. Like, I wonder, like, for voice AI to like dominate, like, do you envision, like, I guess, like, where do you think like the startups are majorly selling to? And do you think there's longevity of the client?
Yeah.
Because I kind of feel like there's a lot of AI solutions that are solving a problem, but like the problem may not exist after the second generation of AI comes. I'm
That's great.
sorry, like this is
Yeah.
such a random
Yeah.
question.
Well, as I think about the use cases, I think there are definitely some use cases that are better suited than others. So a use case where, the human just wants to get to resolution quickly and they're willing to put up with speaking to the agent. And so I think to your point, like if I'm trying to like reschedule a flight, or I'm trying to get to customer success, I'm trying to get a refund on something. If this can do it in a fraction of the time versus waiting, 15 minutes for the human to be available, I think those are no-brainer use cases. I also think it's the use cases where the human has, is incentivized to put up with potentially like a less than ideal experience. And examples like this would be within recruiting. We've seen a lot of use cases where a recruiting agency used to rely on humans to cold outbound call candidates to see if they'd be interested in a job. And a human can only call so many people in a day. Now we've got these AI voice agents that can call 1,000 candidates in a day and put them through a 15-minute screening, just collect basic information about their availability and skills. And that's a use case where the human, the person receiving that call, assuming they're interested in a job, they're willing to put up with a maybe slightly less than ideal conversation because there's something in it for them. So I think those are the ones we'll start with. And as the technology gets better and better, it'll just eat away at more and more of the repetitive conversations that businesses are having.
I wonder, so like who is buying these things? Is this like the McDonald's of the world, or like, because obviously all the tech company are building something in-house. Like Amazon will have like the return assistant. I don't know what's his or her name. It was low-key just like one button and then this thing is returned. Um what's like, I guess like what would be the current, like, I guess like what would you identify as like the biggest client for like AI startups?
We're seeing every version of it. There are a handful of companies that are building the enterprise grade customer service experience exactly like you described for the McDonald's of the world, that are trying to go after big enterprises, where they're going to have a highly customized experience for that enterprise. And then we're seeing a lot of companies that are just going after small businesses. So they say, I have a voice agent that I've fine tuned and designed for plumbing businesses, for recruiting staffing agencies is one of these examples, for car dealerships. I mean, logistics companies, we've seen them across a bunch of different verticals.
How would you diligence the plumbing and the, like every different subsector of clients? Like, would you, let's say, like spend Monday to talk to 5 plumbing agency and ask if they would deploy this particular startup's product? Or like, I mean, like basically gave them a trial, or like, um, and then Tuesday you move on to the dentist, and then the Wednesday it's like hair salon, or like how do you diligence? Because I feel like that's so much different verticals. Like, although of course you can have like a phone call with like an expert every day, but like that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's not a real shortcut to it. I mean, we try to leverage as much of our existing knowledge about these verticals because we have companies that are already serving. We've got a dental voice company in Weave that we've invested in. We've got companies selling to plumbers in service. And so we could try to get really smart on all these verticals through our existing investments. We talked to the Toast team for a company that's selling into restaurants. But in the end of the day, we have to talk to customers. And so when we try to do as much pre-work as possible, and we'll talk to, for instance, representative customers, even if we're doing diligence before we've gotten to a specific company, we want to understand, is there an opportunity in this industry? We might go out and talk to, a handful of representative buyers just to understand their receptiveness to the general pitch. But then when we get to actually diligencing a specific company, that's where we'd be speaking with their customers in particular.
I've done that. I find really hard because like the people will be like, okay, yeah, like this is nice, but like sometimes like we won't use it. But like on the other hand, this is like we're talking really early stage company, and then maybe this is like their first round of product that like people may not use it. How do you quickly identify if someone will be able to produce a better product throughout time and versus some company that are just gonna be like stay at where they are?
Yeah, I actually think this is one of the over time, this is one of the leading indicators of success that I've relied on more and more, which is just how quickly does the company ship product. And I think about this with, there's a company we invested in recently, Good Ship, which is like a procurement for supply chain logistics and freight orchestration platform. I met them at the very early stages, kind of probably when they were raising their pre-seed round, and thought the team was great, heard the idea, but they didn't have any product. And then we caught up again, whatever, 6-12 months later, and they had an initial version of the product. And then we caught up again another 6-12 months. And I was just blown away by how much they built in that period of time. And I think that is as much as possible, just seeing how much did they even ship week to week. Like you will see the great teams are moving really quickly. They're super responsive to the customer demands, and they're able to churn out product really quickly. And that just gives people an unfair advantage to be able to navigate as markets shift, as they get different feedback from customers.
I think like another really hard piece would be like, if when you identify they are shipping really quickly, obviously other VC will also identify they ship really quickly. And I feel like it's like when you approach a company like after they identify they are having a huge edge, it will becoming overly popular. How do you kind of like win the deal when it's becoming overly popular, when their like indicator are kind of like strong?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the best businesses are not a secret generally. And so, I don't know that we have a secret to that, other than we try to build a strong relationship over time, because I think it's much easier. We want the founders to really know us, and vice versa, before we enter these long-term relationships with them. And we try to really demonstrate our sector expertise, which is part of the reason that I'm so focused on us going deep in a number of verticals, so we can really, they don't feel like they need to educate us about the way that their market works, and we can be thought partners to them building the business. So yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, ultimately it comes down to trying to put ourselves forward as the best partner for the founders, and hope we're the ones they choose.
Amazing. Oh, sorry. I feel like we have so much we didn't go through, but okay. So we're at the 1 minute fire on. Okay. So what's your favorite book?
Oh man. For me, I love nonfiction stories, like particularly these like adventure or stories of people overcoming just unbelievable challenges. And for me, I love this book called Endurance. It's the story of Ernest Shackleton getting basically like his attempt to, in the early 1900s, sail to Antarctica and cross it by foot. And like the short story is they don't make it there at all. They end up adrift on ice for nearly a year. And the amazing part about it is just, not only does he get them rescued, but they don't lose a single person throughout the journey. And so I just find it's both like an incredible story of leadership and perseverance, but also an incredibly entertaining read.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oh. I think if I could invite anyone alive or dead, I would. I'd probably pick someone like a Benjamin Franklin, or somebody like that, who I think of just like these people who have been throughout history some of the best first principles thinkers, original thinkers, like didn't necessarily rely on conventional dogma or wisdom, but really thought for themselves. Because I think that we're at this point now with LLMs where none of us know what's really possible. We're largely figuring it out by experimenting. And so I think it'd be super interesting to have a dinner party with somebody like that and show them, this is the technology we have available today. What should we all do with it? Because I think a lot of people are trying to figure that out right now.
What's one piece of well, actually, who made the biggest impact in your career?
I mean, aside from my mom, I
Oh,
think
I'm sorry.
if I had to
say that, but
I think I'm sure I'm gonna miss people, but like the first person that comes to mind, honestly, is my partner Kent Bennett. He's based in our Cambridge office, and he was the one that gave me my internship at Bessemer. He was, I kind of pitched him initially on this crazy concept that I had for like actually AI in the enterprise. This was back like 8 years ago now. And he told me, I'm not interested in that at all, but I'm interested in GovTech. And do you want to work on a GovTech project with me? And I just like quickly raised my hand and said yes. And so Kent gave me my first, opportunity to work at Bessemer, and he was instrumental in helping me ultimately join the firm full time. So I'm eternally grateful to him.
how like like I feel like what would make you stand out, because I feel like there must be like 75 like top MBAs that are trying to break into Bessemer. Like, so I wonder what would be like your biggest advice for like people who are like trying to be your mentee, or like someone who's like applying a job after this podcast for to work for you.
Yeah, this is one I get asked about a lot. And I think for me, it was just understanding that the most venture firms are not thinking about hiring an intern, or they're like, don't have a project in mind. So if possible, come prepared with something. So I would just show up to these internships and I'd have this 4-page slide deck of, this is a project I want to do. This is why I think it's interesting. And like, this is what I'm going to do over the course of the next couple of months. And I did that. And even though Ken didn't think it was interesting at all, I guess he like appreciated the self-direction and stuff. And so that helps me at least, stand out a little bit.
So before we jump into the last fire round, I have one actual fire round. I'm sorry, it just came to my mind. What would be an AI tool that you can't live without?
Cool.
Trick answer. You can say the iPhone, but iPhone is AI. But anyway, please keep going. Sorry.
That's true. No, I think that's a great answer. Honestly, for me, it's like as much as I'm in it every day, I have to say perplexity. Actually, that's probably the best example. Like,
ooh, same. Oh, actually, I would say Anthropic. I'll go against you because I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I give a pretty good answer. Where can people find you outside of work?
Outside of work, people can find me at LinkedIn if they're trying to reach me. But outside of work, I've got 3 little kids under 5, and I'm like trying to balance being a parent with also like getting outside. So you can find me pushing a heavy jogging stroller around the suburbs of Boston. That's probably where you can find me.
Amazing. Also, yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. You're so nice to chat with.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Grace. It was my pleasure.
Let me quickly